Qin Zheng was confused about the relationship between Chu Peihan and Gu Ning. They didn't seem like friends, because Chu Peihan always talked to Gu Ning in an unfriendly way. However, she stood up for Gu Ning. Qin Zheng wasn't sure whether Chu Peihan was helping Gu Ning or merely hated him. If Chu Peihan hated him, he honestly had no idea why she would do that. On the other side, Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao didn't know what had happened this morning. They believed Chu Peihan was here to laugh at Gu Ning too. In Gu Xiaoxiao's and Chen Ziao's eyes, Gu Ning was a joke herself who was meant to be bullied. They never thought about the possibility that Chu Peihan and Gu Ning were friends. It was impossible from their perspectives. Why? They didn't believe Chu Peihan, a girl from a powerful family, would make a friend with Gu Ning, who was from a poor family. Actually, they weren't clear about Chu Peihan's background. They only knew she had support from the principal. Everyone, Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao included, believed Chu Peihan was here to make fun of Gu Ning, except Qin Zheng, who looked doubtful. Yumixi was nervous now but didn't dare to say anything. I know. They're all jealous of my beauty, Gu Ning joked, like her beauty was really a burden to her. Zhang Yiming immediately laughed out loud. He looked at Gu Ning with disdain. Gu Ning, how dare you to say that? I don't see your beauty at all, but your poverty is quite obvious. Exactly, nobody will be jealous of you. You poor girl. Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao agreed at once. Though they did bully Gu Ning because she was prettier than them, they would never admit it. No one knew the real reason why Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao enjoyed bullying Gu Ning, but it was a common acknowledgement that Gu Ning was more beautiful than Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao. Thus, Gu Ning's reply didn't raise much dislike. Gu Ning wasn't mad at all. Then why won't you leave me alone? I don't think I've ever hurt them. If they're not being jealous of my beauty, then what? While Gu Ning was saying, she unconsciously wore a cute face. Everyone, Qin Zheng included, was attracted by her at once. Gu Ning was a beauty indeed. Before Tang Aining was reborn to her body, she had always been quiet, self-abased. Even though she was beautiful, nobody appreciated her beauty. But now Gu Ning was full of confidence and power. It was hard to ignore her. Now more and more students around them believed Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao bullied Gu Ning, only because Gu Ning was prettier than them. After a while, Gu Ning added, and Chen Ziao just said I'm bullied because of my poverty. Actually, I don't understand why my poverty somehow becomes the reason that she should bully me. Gu Ning said in a calm and slow way, without anger or hatred, like she wasn't the one who had been bullied. Hearing this, everyone's opinion of Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao became very low. Some even felt anger and unfairness for Gu Ning. What Gu Ning had said was the plain truth, which everyone had seen and heard. At short notice, Gu Ning won most students' support. Exactly what's wrong with being poor? They're bullies. No one would stand still and wait to be hit. Idiot. She has even humiliated the girl's family. She's such a bad person. The crowd of onlookers started to blame Chen Ziao. You. Chen Ziao was so irritated that she didn't know how to argue back. Gu Xiaoxiao was speechless too, while Qin Zheng, Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang stayed away from the drama. They noticed Chen Ziao lost everyone's support and wasn't willing to be involved. The boys didn't want to ruin their fame as well. Gu Ning, what have you done the last lifetime? Your poverty now becomes a problem in others' eyes. Chu Peihan rolled her eyes at Gu Ning with dislike. Well, in that case, I must be super rich one day.
Gu Ning responded.
She would sooner or later. Gu Xiaoxiao immediately mocked. Gee, live in your dream, Gu Ning. She wouldn't believe Gu Ning could be rich throughout her life. I think it's possible, Chu Peihan suddenly said. Chu Peihan had the feeling that Gu Ning wasn't an ordinary girl. Gu Xiaoxiao was surprised that Chu Peihan helped Gu Ning. Wasn't she supposed to laugh at Gu Ning as well? Gu Xiaoxiao, let's go and see. I'm poor now, but it doesn't mean I'll be poor forever. Gu Ning replied with determination and confidence. Before Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao could argue back, Gu Ning opened her mouth again. Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Xiao, I advise you both to stay away from me from now on, or you'll regret for sure. Gu Xiaoxiao warned them with a cold look. Gu Ning actually didn't care about whether Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Xiao would listen to her. She had made her mind to stand up for herself against them. Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Xiao were certainly displeased by Gu Ning's warning. Gu Ning, what do you think you are? You. Right at that moment, Qin Zheng interrupted. Enough! Gu Xiaoxiao was his girlfriend, and he ought to protect her. Qin Zheng now understood Chu Peihan was here to help Gu Ning. If he didn't get involved, the drama wouldn't end. But Gu Ning hit Xiao. Gu Xiaoxiao wasn't willing to give up. Before Qin Zheng could reply, Gu Ning said first, she deserves it. If she does it again in the future, a slap won't be enough. Then Gu Ning gave Chen Xiao a cold look. The latter trembled out of fear. Now Chen Xiao was really scared of Gu Ning. Gu Ning, let's wait and see. Though Chen Xiao felt frightened, she didn't want to escape like that. She pretended to be calm and left with Gu Xiaoxiao, or escaped away. Qin Zheng and his friends took a look at Gu Ning, then were gone too. They all thought to themselves that Gu Ning was literally different now. Seeing this, Gu Ning merely sneered, then walked back to her seat. The rest of the students dispersed afterwards. However, a girl had no intention to leave. She sat down right beside Gu Ning. I'm starving now. Where the hell is my food? An unkind voice as usual. Gu Ning didn't mind though. Yu Mixi felt nervous the minute Chu Peihan sat down. She was confused as well. Wasn't Chu Peihan attacking Gu Ning a moment ago? Why are they look so close now? You can't let them go like that. If I had been you, I would have beaten them all. You need to teach them a lesson first. Then they will stay away.
Chu Peihan kom lại.
She disagreed with Gu Ning about what just had happened. Gu Ning couldn't help but pull her lips. Chu Peihan was really a bad girl who liked fighting so much. Though Gu Ning appreciated what Chu Peihan had said and done, she knew she wasn't a teenager girl anymore. Her soul was a 25-years-old mature woman. Gu Ning would not beat someone unless it was necessary. She wasn't a coward. If I had beaten them, I must pay for their treatment as well. I don't want to do that, Gu Ning said. Chu Peihan was struck dumb at first, then realized Gu Ning was from a poor family. She immediately felt embarrassed. But Chu Peihan felt slightly uncomfortable. Was Gu Ning implying that she liked to pay for others' treatment? Chu Peihan did pay for others' treatment every time she had beaten someone. She had spent a lot on that indeed, but there was always someone that annoyed her. At this moment the food was on the table. Chu Peihan dropped the topic at once and enjoyed her meal. The meal was enough for 3 of them. On the other side, Qin Zheng and his friends had to go to the infirmary due to Chen Xiao's injury. They didn't have a chance to eat. After the meal, it was still too early for the afternoon classes. Most seniors went back to their classrooms because they were under great academic pressure. However, it wasn't necessary for Gu Ning to spend her leisure time on studying, so she had no plan to go back. Do you want to go back to the classroom reading? Or hang out with me? Gu Ning asked. No, I'm not going to study. I would rather fool around if I'm free. Chu Peihan disliked studying apparently. She would skip her classes to play outside, and definitely wasn't willing to study while she was free. However, Chu Peihan could always earn high scores even though she hated studying so much. And there would be some students who always earn low scores no matter how hard they studied. Actually, if you wanted to have a high score, you needed to be clever and active in thinking instead of remembering everything in the books. Chu Peihan was the kind of smart girl who knew how to make full use of her knowledge. Besides, she did spend some time on studying. It wasn't enough to be clever only. I'll go with you. Though Yu Mixi studied hard, she needed to relax as well. Yu Mixi was one of the top 10 excellent students in her class. She was hopeful to get into a great university if she could do well in the entrance exam. Yu Mixi knew when to unwind and when to study hard. Thus, the three of them went to a small forest afterwards. Although Yumixi felt slightly uneasy with Chu Pei-han, she didn't receive any unkindness from Chu Pei-han. Yumixi gradually relaxed herself. Gu-ning actually noticed the fear from Yumixi to Chu Pei-han, but she didn't say anything. She wanted Yumixi to feel and judge on her own. Meanwhile, Chen Xiao had gone to the infirmary and applied some ointment, but her face was still red and swollen. She had to go back home afterwards. The break time soon passed, and the three girls went back to their classrooms. Every time Gu-ning went into her classroom, she would receive many unkind looks, but this time, Gu-ning found there were fewer unkind looks. Many of her classmates had already witnessed what Gu-ning had done to Xiao Feifei this morning, and then heard about the drama in the canteen. They now knew Gu-ning was certainly different. Still, there were some students believed Gu-ning had found herself a lot of troubles. Gu-ning didn't care actually. She just wanted to stay alone. She would only fight against someone who stood in her way. Xiao Feifei and her friends deliberately escaped from Gu-ning's sight. The afternoon classes were over after a short time. Gu-ning went to have meal with Yumixi as usual. They didn't meet Qin Zheng but Muku instead. The minute Muku saw Gu-ning, his eyes brightened. He immediately ran to Gu-ning. "Gu-ning, what a coincidence. Let me buy you a meal," Muku said. "Why?" Gu-ning asked. She wasn't familiar with Muku actually. Seeing Muku being so polite, Gu-ning knew he must have something to talk to her. Muku scratched his head with shyness then answered directly. "Well, I saw what you've done yesterday on the street, and I want you to teach me." Though Muku didn't like fighting normally, he loved watching action shows. Yumixi was confused. She didn't understand what they were talking about. "Well, I didn't show much yesterday. Aren't you afraid that I was just pretending, and I know nothing about kung fu?" Gu-ning didn't answer Muku's question immediately, but asked him back. "Even though I'm wrong, it's the undeniable truth that you're better than me at kung fu. If you're willing to take me as your apprentice, that will be the best." Muku looked at Gu-ning sincerely. If Gu-ning had been an ordinary girl, she wouldn't have been able to knock down three men easily. She must be a master of kung fu. Muku was worried that Gu-ning would reject his proposal, so he added, "Please, I won't bother you when you're studying. You can teach me when you're free. And I can pay for your classes or do whatever you ask me to do. Anything," Muku said in all sincerity to show his determination. Actually, Muku hit the point. Gu-ning hesitated before but now felt touched. She thought of Qian. Gu-ning lacked of friends now, while Muku was from a powerful family. She might need his help someday in the future. Gu-ning admitted she did this for her own good, but also because Muku was a good guy and would be a good friend. Thus Gu-ning replied, "I can teach you if you like, but you don't need to be my apprentice. I don't want your money neither. All I want are your help and support." Really? Muku was excited that Gu-ning agreed. "Since all our classes are over now, I'm free, and I can teach you later," Gu-ning said. Really? Muku asked again with excitement. It was too good to be true for him. Sure, he said. Muku repeated his word for several times to show his happiness. He would have jumped up high if Gu-ning hadn't been here. Then Muku invited Gu-ning once again to have meal with him. Gu-ning accepted. She, along with Yumixi, followed Muku towards the second floor of the canteen. Yumixi was still curious about the discussion between the two, but didn't know how to ask for more information. Though Gu-ning had said there was no need for Muku to be her apprentice, Muku insisted to call Gu-ning boss in order to have a closer connection with her. Gu-ning was reluctant at first. She didn't like to be called boss actually. However, Muku insisted to call her boss or master. Compared with master, boss was more acceptable for Gu-ning. During the meal, Muku called Gu-ning boss all the time. He actively served Gu-ning without any complaint, which raised much attention from students around them. Gu-ning felt embarrassed and stopped Muku from doing that. If Yumixi hadn't found out the truth from their discussion, She would also have believed Muku was in love with Guning and was chasing her. When Yumixi was told that Guning had beaten down a man by a single hit, she was more than astonished. But when she thought of what had happened this morning between Guning and Xiao Feifei, she believed Guning was really powerful. All of a sudden, Yumixi admired Guning more. Guning, would you please teach me as well? Yumixi almost begged. Sure, Guning answered quickly. Guning actually hoped Yumixi could learn some kung fu to protect herself at least. But she would never force Yumixi to learn. It all depended on herself. If Yumixi was just passionate about it for a very short time, then gave up, Guning wouldn't bother to teach her. But if Yumixi was determined, Guning was ready to train her like a professional fighter. After the meal, 3 of them walked straight to the small forest. There were few people there. They didn't want to bother others and vice versa. Since Guning had promised to teach them, she must show her real ability. She needed to let them believe that she was a real master of kung fu. Thus Guning didn't hesitate at all. She beat Muku down to the ground within one move. Muku was struck dumb not by pain but by shock. Though Guning didn't hesitate, her body wasn't in a very good condition now. Her strength was limited. Muku felt the pain but was safe. A fighter must learn and grow from his pain. Yumixi, who was standing aside, was amazed with her mouth open. She now admired Guning more than ever. Amazing! This was so amazing. Get back to your feet now. Guning criticized Muku, who was still lying on the ground. Since Guning decided to teach them, she would be a strict teacher. Outstanding students were trained by the strict teachers. Guning valued quality and efficiency most, so she wouldn't allow them to waste time. Muku immediately stood up and focused on his training. Guning intended to let Muku understand the skills quickly, so she attacked Muku with full force afterwards. Of course, Guning wouldn't physically abuse Muku. She adjusted her move according to Muku's ability. Guning wanted Muku to experience the pain and skills together during the training. After a while, Muku suffered a lot from the pain around his body. Though he was in great pain, Muku wasn't willing to stop or give up. He faced his challenge with courage. Yumixi was totally absorbed in watching the training. Every time Muku shouted out in pain, she would tremble at the same time, like she was the one who was being beaten. Although there were few people in this wood, Muku's shout attracted several students' attention. Seeing a boy beaten down by a girl, they were all astonished. Some boys even raised their voices. What the F***ck? This girl is too powerful. The boy isn't able to fight back at all. Exactly, let me take a video of them, then upload it onto our school's forum. Ah! A boy took out his phone and was ready to shoot. But before he started, Guning and Muku stopped. Why stop? Go on. I'm about to shoot. The boy raised his voice with anxiety. Guning looked at the boy coldly. She walked towards him. Well, why don't you have a try and fight with me? If the boy took a video of them and put it on their school's forum, everyone would know it. Guning didn't want to get into trouble. The boy was frightened, then immediately rejected. No, I don't think there's a need for that. Then he stepped back far away in case Guning would hit him like the boy on the ground. Once Guning and Muku stopped fighting, the onlookers dispersed gradually. Hey boss, you're much more powerful than I thought you would be. I am right. Muku was in great pain now, but he struggled to ran to Guning. He looked so excited, like he was the master of kung fu instead of Guning. Guning smiled back, but she felt upset in her heart. Compared with ordinary people, she was quite good, but compared with herself, Guning knew she was still weak. She was merely as good as herself in the last incarnation. How are you now? Yumixi asked Muku with worry. She knew Muku suffered a lot from the beating by Guning, but couldn't help asking when he put on a casual face. I'm absolutely in pain, but it's quite normal. You learn and improve from the pain.
Muku replied.
He enjoyed it so much. At this moment, Guning said to Yumixi seriously, Mixi, it's never easy to learn kung fu. If you really want to be a master, You must be prepared for continuous pain and injuries. Besides, you need to be determined as well. To train yourself like a fighter may help you to protect yourself in the future. But it's all up to you whether you want to learn or not. Yumixi wasn't born in a rich family. She had been doing labor work to support her family when she was a little girl. Pain was her friend to some extent. Like what Guning had said, it might be of great help in the future to train yourself like a fighter. Especially for a girl, knowing how to protect yourself was a great advantage. Thus Yumixi didn't give up. She accepted the training with courage. Yumixi had to learn from the very beginning because she knew nothing about kung fu. Guning didn't demand Yumixi that she should run to school from her home every morning. It was dangerous. She asked Yumixi to arrive at school earlier, then began to run. At the beginning, Guning wasn't very strict with Yumixi. She allowed Yumixi to practice according to her ability. Qinzheng somehow heard of the news that Muku had invited Guning to dine with him. In the evening class, Qinzheng asked Muku, "I heard that you've bought Guning a meal. Why?" Qinzheng honestly didn't know why he would ask Muku. Since he had already broken up with Guning, it was none of his business that Guning had her meal with whom. But Qinzheng couldn't control himself. "Nothing, I just met her on a road then bought her a meal." Muku didn't tell Qinzheng everything. Qinzheng apparently wasn't satisfied with the answer. He couldn't help but criticize Muku. "Since when you've been so familiar with Guning and didn't fill me in?" Muku was irritated by Qinzheng's criticism. "Qinzheng, what's wrong with you? She's not your girlfriend any longer. Why can't I have a meal with her?" Though Muku and Qinzheng spent lots of time together, they weren't close. Muku didn't care to argue with Qinzheng. Moreover, Guning now had an important position in Muku's heart. He would stand up for Guning without doubt. "You!" Qinzheng was slightly mad, but he soon realized it was none of his business, so he closed his mouth. It was 9:30. The evening class was over. Those students who were from a rich family would be picked up by a car, while the rest would take a taxi or a bus. Guning, on the contrary, wouldn't take a taxi or a bus. She ran. Although the district where Guning lived was under reconstruction and unsafe, Guning wasn't afraid at all. It wasn't the first time that she went back home alone at night. She had never been in danger before. However, tonight was different. A black van ceased in front of Guning at short notice. 3 young men got off from the car and went straight to Guning. Every man had tattoos around their arms. They seemed like hoodlums. "You're Guning, right?" The head of the 3 asked with certainty. "Who sent you?" Guning wasn't scared but inquired calmly. Though she had no idea who was behind them, she knew they must be sent by Xiao Feifei or Chan Xiao. "Don't you know whom you've had bad blood with?" Another man mocked. "Too many to remember," Guning sighed. Now, the 3 hoodlums noticed Guning had remained calm all the time. She wasn't terrified at all. They felt shamed but were curious at the same time. "Gee, what a brave girl. Now I know why you dared to have bad blood with the daughter from the Xiao family." This time the hoodlum directly revealed the people behind them. It was Xiao Feifei. Guning wasn't surprised neither. "Then so what?" Guning asked airily. "She wants us to rape you, then post the video on the internet." The hoodlum told Guning everything. He didn't care whether Guning knew it or not because they were going to do it anyway. Even those hoodlums had to admit that this female student before them was unusually beautiful. They had played around with many female students before, but no one was as pretty as Guning. On the other side, Guning was extremely mad now. To rape her and take a video, Xiao Feifei had crossed the line once more. "In your dreams, idiots." Guning was annoyed. She kicked straight at the leading hoodlum's D**CK. The man didn't expect Guning would attack him, and even that fast. Before he could escape, he was hit right away. A scream sounded loud in the cold night, which was utterly frightening. The man bent on his knees on the ground in great pain. He covered his D*ck with both hands. Beads of sweat around his forehead. The other two men were scared, and even wanted to run away. They comforted themselves that even a broken clock was right twice a day. Gu Ning was merely a teenage girl. Then the two swore at Gu Ning, trying to punch her with fists. Gu Ning threw her backpack on the first man's face directly with great force. The man was hit down and knocked on their van. Within a second, Gu Ning lifted her foot, kicking the second before her. This man was much taller than Gu Ning, so she almost fell when she kicked on his lap. Gu Ning threw her backpack in hand once more, aiming at the man's head. The second man was caught right away, then fell down on the ground. At the same time, the first man got a steel pipe from the van. He ran to Gu Ning afterwards. Gu Ning stepped back at once. But before Gu Ning could fight again, a shadow sprang out from a corner. He hit the back of the three hoodlums' necks separately without any hesitation. Those hoodlums immediately fell into unconsciousness. It all happened too fast. Though Gu Ning had seen it clearly, she had no idea how the man was able to do that. Gu Ning smelt the disgusting flavor of blood before she could see the man's face. She frowned unconsciously. The man was injured. The next second, Gu Ning's sight fell on the man. The minute the man walked into Gu Ning's sight, Gu Ning was amazed by his appearance. This man was extraordinarily handsome. He probably was the most handsome man Gu Ning had ever met till now. The man was in a suit of black clothes. He was around 6 feet 3 inches tall and 25 years old. His features were beautiful and delicate. Only his skin was a little pale. Probably the man had lost much blood because of his injuries. Thus he looked pale now. Although the man was injured, he seemed dangerous still, especially his deep dark eyes. Even Gu Ning felt threatened. The man was so powerful. He must be an extraordinary man. Do you drive? Suddenly, the man said with coldness but politely. Yes, Gu Ning answered at once. Drive me to the Fenghua luxury mansion. This is your reward, the man said, and took out a green jade in the size of a quail egg to Gu Ning. Seeing it was jade, Gu Ning unconsciously used her jade eyes. Then she was amazed again because there was a thick white fog around the jade. Gu Ning knew little about jade, but she could tell this jade must be expensive from its power. The man must be of great wealth. Great deal. Gu Ning answered without further delay. She took the jade over directly before the man could tell her the value of it. The man was a little surprised, for Gu Ning didn't hesitate at all. Did she knew this jade was real? If she knew the jade was authentic at the first sight, she must be a special girl. Anyway, the man made a deal with Gu Ning. Besides, the jade was real indeed and was worth of dozens of million yuan. A deal was made based on the willingness of both sides. Though Gu Ning made the deal with the man only because she wanted the jade, the man wouldn't criticize her for that, because she earned it herself. The man turned around and got in the car. He wasn't worried that Gu Ning would regret after she had taken the jade. When the man turned around, Gu Ning immediately put the jade into the telepathic eye space. The second the jade was in the telepathic eye space, everything became clearer before Gu Ning's eyes. She felt relaxed too. The jade was helpful indeed. Now Gu Ning had a stronger desire to collect more jade, but she had to wait till weekends. Gu Ning got into the black van without delay. She started the car and left, and the three hoodlums were left on the street. Well, are you all right? Do you want me to help you with your injuries? Out of politeness, Gu Ning asked the man. No thanks, the man answered. He had no intention to talk. Since the man didn't want her help, Gu Ning closed her mouth. After a few seconds, Gu Ning suddenly realized she had made a bad decision. She drove the hoodlums' car away directly. What if they sued her for stealing? And there were surveillance cameras around the street. They couldn't deny it. Thinking of that, Gu Ning slammed on the brakes. The man, who was sitting at the back seat, flew ahead. What's wrong with you? The man asked with dissatisfaction. His voice sounded much weaker than before. We just grabbed others' car. What if I'm sued for stealing? There are surveillance cameras on the street. I can't deny it. Guning was worried. She didn't want to be caught into the police station. Relax, you won't be involved, the man said. His voice with determination comforted Guning. She didn't waste more time and drove away. Before long, Guning's phone rang. Without looking at the caller's ID, Guning knew whom it was. It must be Gu Man. Guning immediately took out her phone. It was Gu Man indeed. She answered the call at once. Before she could say a word, Gu Man's anxious voice sounded. Ning Ning, where are you now? How come you're not home yet? Normally, Gu Ning would be home 20 minutes earlier. And now Gu Man was worried about her. Gu Ning instantly comforted her mother. Mom, let me explain. My classmate has sprained her ankle by accident. I'm sending her home now. Please don't worry. I'll be right back home as long as she's home. Hearing this, Gu Man was relieved. She always trusted her daughter. Great, you must be careful yourself, Gu Man said. I will, Mom.
Bie, Guning sighed.
She breathed out a long breath. Guning didn't notice that the man at the back was a little upset and envious while she was talking to her mother. Fenghua Luxury Mansion was the best living area in City F. It was near downtown, quiet, and had the best location, amenities as well as environment. People who lived in Fenghua Luxury Mansion were either the rich or the authorities. Guning's eldest uncle, Gu Qinxiang, had always wanted to buy a house in Fenghua Luxury Mansion, but it was too expensive to afford. Each house cost at least 5 or 6 million yuan. Though Gu Qingxiang has millions of wealth, he couldn't afford it. Gu Qingxiang's assets included his movable and immovable property, while his movable property was merely around 8 million. He also needed much money to run his company. If he used the money to buy a house, his company would go bankrupt. Gu Ning, on the contrary, had made her mind to buy a house for Gu Man and Gu Qing's family respectively in Fenghua Luxury Mansion. Gu Ning was a skillful driver. She drove fast and steadily. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Fenghua Luxury Mansion. The man got off the car the minute it stopped. Drive the car back to where it has been. I'll handle the surveillance cameras. You don't need to worry, the man said, then turned around walking towards the gate. Gu Ning didn't care that the man was being cold. She knew that was the way the man behaved. Besides, they were merely strangers. Gu Ning drove the car back afterwards. Another 20 minutes later, Gu Ning was back while the hoodlums were gone already. Gu Ning had no idea whether those hoodlums had woken up and left on their own, or someone had discovered them then called the police. They might have been sent to the hospital. Though the man had promised Gu Ning wouldn't be involved, Gu Ning still wanted to stay away from what had happened tonight. She parked the car then ran to her home. Far away from the building they lived in, Gu Ning saw Gu Man standing at the entrance of an alley. All of a sudden Gu Ning felt like crying. She ran ahead and called Gu Man with love. Mom! Gu Man treated Gu Ning so well, which moved Gu Ning and made her feel guilty at the same time. She shouldn't have let Gu Man be concerned. Seeing Gu Ning was fine, Gu Man was finally relieved. Ning Ning, are you all right? I'm good, Mom. Let's go back home.
Guning replied.
She held Gu Man's arm, leaning close to Gu Man like a little girl. Gu Man wore a happy face. The mother and her daughter went home together. Their shadows became longer and longer under a street lamp. In a luxurious bedroom, the man was half naked, lying on the bed. There were many wounds around his body. Most were gunshot wounds that had already become ugly scars. Some of them were extremely unsightly. Meanwhile, there were 2 bleeding holes on his left shoulder and waist. They were new wounds. A family doctor was administering medicine to him, then wrapped his wounds. The man was exactly the one who had made a deal with Gu Ning, and let her drive him back. After a while the family doctor left. A man in a gray Armani casual suit walked inside. He was around 25 years old with white smooth skin. His eyes were deep dark and charming. Thick eyebrows, Grecian nose and perfect lips all showed the man's elegance and nobility. I've handled the surveillance cameras. Nothing left. The man said with pride, almost showing off his ability. Great. A simple answer. The man asked with curiosity, shouting, how did you manage to come back? And why do you need to destroy the tapes of those surveillance cameras along the way home? Someone sent me home, but we stole a car. No evidence should be left. So the tapes of the surveillance cameras must be destroyed. Leng Xiaoting said calmly, but the man was shocked. What? You stole a car? It was so unbelievable that Leng Xiaoting would do that. Enough, I need some rest. You can leave now. Before the man could ask more, Leng Xiaoting forced him to leave. The man felt aggrieved. This was his house after all. How could the guest force the host to leave? The man was upset, but not dared to say it out. Thus he left the bedroom reluctantly and closed the door for Leng Xiaoting. Leng Xiaoting couldn't sleep. He just wanted to stay alone. The next day, Guning got up at 5:40. She spent 10 minutes on brushing teeth and washing face. At 5:50, she left her home, running to her school. Half an hour later, Guning arrived at school. She bought herself breakfast, heading to the football field while eating on the way. Guning finished her breakfast on her way to the football field. When she finally arrived, Muku and Yumixi were already there. Both of them were running. The two apparently wanted to learn Kung Fu well. Guning joined them afterwards. Guning, good morning. Seeing Guning was here, Muku and Yumixi greeted her at the same time. Muku breathed steadily while Yumixi sounded weak. How many circles do you have already? Guning asked. 3, the two answered. Guning was satisfied with the answer. A circle around this football field was about 400 meters. 3 circles amounted to 1,200 meters. Yumixi had done well, given she wasn't physically strong. Very well. Mixi, if it's possible, you can have another 2 circles. If you can't do it, it's fine. You can stop right away. Yumixi was exhausted now. Another 2 circles were a big challenge for her. Thus Guning didn't give her much pressure. As for Muku, Guning wouldn't hesitate to torture him. Muku, run after me at the same speed now, Guning said, then ran ahead first. Muku immediately followed up. He had intentionally slowed his pace down when he had been running with Yumixi. Now with Guning, he could enjoy the feeling of running like a wild horse. Though Guning was running fast, she knew this wasn't a race. Muku knew it as well. Physical training wasn't the same thing as race. He didn't run past Guning on purpose, but remained behind her. After a circle, Muku started to be out of breath. 2 circles later, Muku fought for his breath. After 3 circles, Muku was exhausted and gradually was left behind by Guning. Then Muku found out Guning's pace of running was all the same, no matter how many circles she had run. Even every step was of the same length when Guning was running. Though there was several centimeters difference, it could be omitted. Muku was 100% sure that Guning must have received professional training for years. He was more respectful and curious about Guning now. Seeing Guning and Muku had already finished 3 circles, Yumixi felt envious. She wished she had been as physically strong as them. No pain, no gain. Yumixi knew it clearly. Guning and Muku had trained themselves for many years, while she had just started to exercise. Yumixi was envious but not jealous. She made up her mind to do better than herself. As long as she was determined, she could be as strong as Guning and Muku one day in the future. 4 circles later, Muku was far behind Guning. He could barely breathe, and his pace slowed down gradually. Muku actually was physically strong. Running fast cost much more strength than running slowly. 5 circles of running at a fast pace was equal to dozens of circles at a slow pace. Even Guning had to stop after 6 circles of fast running. She was able to continue but wasn't willing to. Gu Ning, you're incredible. You can keep the same length of each step and run at the same pace. Wow. Muku actually stopped after 5 circles. He was out of breath and felt thirsty. He kept walking for a while because he knew he couldn't sit down right after running. You'll get used to it, Gu Ning replied while catching her breath. When Gu Ning and Muku had finished their circles, Yumixi was completely tired after 2 circles. She could barely stand but struggled to finish her training. Gu Ning walked over and stopped her. It's all right. You've done very well today. Let's have a walk first, then take a rest. Yumixi immediately leaned against Gu Ning. She felt dizzy and unable to walk by herself. After a long while, Yumixi finally recovered. Gu Ning pulled out 2 bottles of water from her backpack, handing them to Muku and Yumixi. Then she took out another bottle for herself. Gu Ning bought the water on her way to football field. She knew they would be in great need of water after running. Thanks. Muku and Yumixi thanked Gu Ning. They both opened the bottle immediately and poured the water into their mouth, like they hadn't had water for many days. It was 5 minutes away from the morning class. They went back to classroom together. They planned to continue their training when they were free. Xiao Feifei was in good mood today. She assumed those hoodlums she had hired had successfully done what she had asked them to do. Though she hadn't received their call, Xiao Feifei believed Gu Ning wasn't able to fight with several men. Probably those hoodlums were too happy to call her. Feifei, what has happened? You look so pleased today. Exactly, tell us now. Yang Yulu and Wu Qingya didn't know what Xiao Feifei had secretly done. They asked with curiosity. It is a good news, but it's not a great time to tell you. I'll let you know when we finish the classes today, Xiao Feifei replied. Though Yang Yulu and Wu Qingya were curious, they didn't dare to force Xiao Feifei to tell them. It was 2 minutes away from the morning class. Everyone was in the classroom except Gu Ning and Yumixi. Seeing Gu Ning was absent, Xiao Feifei was more certain that Gu Ning had been in trouble. She put on a big smile. But next, Xiao Feifei's smile froze on her face. She looked frightened even. It was Gu Ning. She showed up at the door of the classroom. Gu Ning had no idea whether Xiao Feifei knew the truth or not. She only understood Xiao Feifei's face must be interesting when she appeared. Thus the minute Gu Ning walked in the classroom, she stared at Xiao Feifei. Noticing Xiao Feifei being in shock, Gu Ning knew Xiao Feifei wasn't aware that her plan had failed. Gu Ning, why are you here? Xiao Feifei jumped up from her desk. Everyone around her was confused. This was classroom and Gu Ning was supposed to attend the classes. What was wrong with that? Oh, if I'm not here, where should I be? Gu Ning asked Xiao Feifei with provocation. Didn't you? The second Xiao Feifei opened her mouth, she realized she shouldn't have done that. So she immediately shut her mouth. Gu Ning wouldn't let her get away with it easily. She asked, What? No, nothing. Though Xiao Feifei didn't know what exactly had happened yesterday, and she was more than disappointed now, she knew she had to keep it a secret. Really? Gu Ning apparently didn't believe her. Why do you even ask me why I'm here? This is my classroom. If I'm not here, where should I be? Gu Ning continued.
Xiao Feifei panicked.
She didn't know how to deal with it. Yang Yulu and Wu Qingya knew Xiao Feifei so well. They immediately understood Xiao Feifei must have done something to Gu Ning secretly. She probably assumed she had succeeded. That was the reason why she was so happy today. But Gu Ning appeared as usual. Xiao Feifei was surprised and felt guilty. Xiao Feifei didn't dare to tell the truth. Yang Yulu and Wu Qingya both shut their mouth too. They were also unwilling to add fuel on the flames, in case Xiao Feifei would blame them for that later. Luckily, the bell rang, and it was time for the morning reading class. The head teacher was here as well. Gu Ning let go of Xiao Feifei, then went to her seat. There would be ample time ahead. Besides, Gu Ning had no intention to reveal the truth. She preferred to torture her opponents without others knowing. Seeing Gu Ning walk away, Xiao Feifei breathed out. She was annoyed to herself for feeling guilty. What would Gu Ning do even if she found out the truth? Gu Ning was merely a poor girl. She couldn't do anything to hurt Xiao Feifei. After that, Xiao Feifei didn't feel guilty at all. She glared at Gu Ning with intense hatred. She believed Gu Ning had only been lucky to have escaped away yesterday. It wasn't the end of the story. Xiao Feifei started to plan her next step. Gu Ning actually received the unkind look from Xiao Feifei, but she ignored it. The head teacher left after a while. Although Gu Ning's eyes were on her book, she was busy thinking something about herself in her mind. How to build her power. It wasn't as easy as making money. Without power and sources, you could never build your empire only with money. Property and sources were an important step. But before that, Gu Ning needed to have enough money. For Gu Ning, stone gambling was the quickest way to make money. She had the jade eyes and she would never lose. However, she wasn't able to gamble on stones anywhere she wanted. It wasn't convenient. The main origins of stones were Burma and Province Y. They were both far away from City F. There was no direct plane from City F to Province Y. One needed to spend around 2 hours on waiting before transferring to the destination. Thus it took around 7 hours from City F to Province Y. Gu Ning only had her weekends. She didn't have enough time for that. Moreover, she was a senior in a high school, and under great academic pressure. It wasn't easy to ask days off, and her mother Gu Man wouldn't allow her to leave school as well. Thus, Gu Ning had to choose the nearest city with stone gambling. Which city allowed stone gambling? Gu Ning had no idea. She needed to look up on the internet. Unfortunately, her phone was too old to surf the internet. Right at that moment, Gu Ning realized the importance of a great phone. As for her startup fund, she only had 110,000 yuans, which was barely enough. She couldn't buy a single stone with all her savings. Therefore, Gu Ning intended to sell the jade that the man had given her yesterday. She had already absorbed the power of the jade anyway. It was useless to her now. Once she was rich, she could buy whatever jade she wanted. Though the power had been absorbed, the jade was still of excellent quality. Gu Ning was a doer instead of a talker. When they had a break at noon, Gu Ning left her school immediately after she had told Mixi that they would continue the class in the afternoon. The minute Gu Ning walked out the gate of her school, she went on a taxi to the downtown. The downtown wasn't far away. Gu Ning arrived there after 20 minutes. She went straight to a phone shop and bought a homemade mobile phone with the best equipment. If she had had a good reason, she would have bought another one for Gu Man. Gu Ning left the phone shop, going inside a plaza. She found herself a well-decorated restaurant to have meal first. Then she surfed the internet about the knowledge of jade. Since she was going to be in touch with the jade, it was better to know it well first. For now, Gu Ning wanted to find out the quality and value of the jade in her hand. She was going to sell it at a good price. In Gu Ning's mind, a jewelry store was the only way to sell her jade. In that way, the jade could be sold out at a good price. And the jewelry store was always willing to buy a jade of high quality. Gu Ning knew she probably wouldn't get the highest price in the market, but the price wouldn't be low. But she was totally shocked when she found out the background of this jade. Gu Ning knew this jade was of excellent quality, but didn't expect it to be that valuable. It was the top king's green. The king's green was rare in the market, and was super expensive. A ring made of the king's green was worth of around 1 million yuan in the market. Its price could even be higher at auction. The king's green in Gu Ning's hand was as big as a quail's egg. It weighed 10 times heavier than a ring. That was to say, if it was sold according to its weight, it was worth 2 million yuan in the market at least. At auction, it could be sold out at the price of several million. The price could be higher though. Thinking of the price of the king's green, Gu Ning breathed in a long breath. The man had been so generous to give her such a valuable jade. The rich was really different from the poor. What Gu Ning didn't know was the king's green meant nothing to Leng Xiaoting. In Leng Xiaoting's eyes, it was just a stone. He would have already thrown it away if the jade hadn't been so valuable. He had carried the king's green with him, only because his good friend wanted it. He had planned to send it to his friend as a gift, but had ended up giving it to Guning. But Guning was a poor senior student now. She had no idea how to sell the jade at auction. Besides, there was no auction in City F. Guning was satisfied even though she could only sell it at the market price. She found an old jade store named Itsue Jade Store, with 100 years of history on the internet. It wasn't big but had great fame, because the boss of this Itsue Jade Store was the head of the Jade Association in City F. The jade in Itsue Jade Store was also well known for its good quality and reasonable price. Thus, Guning made up her mind to go to Itsue Jade Store, which had a history of 100 years. Though Guning didn't know much about Itsue Jade Store, and she also had no idea whether it was as fair and good as those internet users said online, she would like to trust Itsue Jade Store more than a common jewelry store. She knew the value the jade anyway. If she didn't get a satisfactory price, she wouldn't sell it then. The flagship store of Itsue Jade Store was in the antique market, but it also had many branches in many plaza. Right now, Guning was in a commercial building in the downtown. She decided to go to Itsue Jade Store later. After the research, Guning put her phone and the jade into her backpack and started to eat afterwards. After her meal, she went straight to Itsue Jade Store. The jewelry stores were on the second floor of the building. It took Guning a while before she found Itsue Jade Store. Itsue Jade Store wasn't big, and was decorated in a retro style. All the workers inside were in Cheongsam. The minute Guning walked inside, a saleswoman stepped forward to her. Guning had received a polite greeting as well, though she was a student. She now immediately had a high opinion of Itsue Jade Store. "Miss, what can I do for you?" the saleswoman asked. "What's your best jade here?"
Guning replied.
"The best emerald we have is this one. It's of great quality. The color is bright light green. Then we have this violet emerald. It's very rare and we don't have many jewelry of it. If you want, you can book first," the saleswoman said. "Do you have the king's green here?" Guning asked. The saleswoman was a little embarrassed, then said, "Sorry, the king's green is the rarest kind of emerald. I've worked in this industry for many years, and I've never seen the king's green in my career." "Then do you buy an emerald?"
Guning inquired.
The saleswoman was a little surprised now. She had no idea what Guning wanted to do. Out of politeness, she still answered, "We do buy in some emeralds of high quality at 8/10 price of the market price." 8/10, that was fair. "Great, can I see your manager here please? I want to sell a king's green of the size of a quail's egg," Guning said. "What? The king's green?" A male voice sounded with amazement. A good-looking man, who was around 25 years old and in a suit, strode towards Guning from the door. He asked with excitement and doubt, "Do you really have a king's green of the size of a quail's egg?" Hearing the man's voice, the saleswoman finally recovered from the shocking news. She called the man with great respect, "Mr. Chin." "Yes," Guning replied. "Can I have a look please? If it's real, I'll buy it at the market price." Qin Yifun's eyes were full of anticipation. Though he couldn't believe a student would have the king's green, he wouldn't mind to have a look. The king's green was too rare to miss. "I'm sorry, sir. Since I've turned to Itsue Jade Store before you, I'm afraid I'll only make a deal with you if Itsue Jade Store refused to buy my jade." Guning apologized to Qin Yifun. Guning would like to sell her jade at the market price, but she had already accepted the price offered by Itsue Jade Store. She didn't want to break the rule. Qin Yifun and those workers in Itsue Jade Store were all surprised by Guning's integrity. She would adhere to the rules. Everyone thought highly of Guning now. Miss, this Mr. Qin is the son of our boss. You can make a deal with him directly," a saleswoman introduced. She smiled with sincerity due to her great impression of Guning. He was the son of the boss of Itsue Jade Store? Guning was a little amazed. "Nice to meet you. My name's Qin Yifan. My father owns Itsue Jade Store. Qin Yifan introduced himself to Gu Ning, reaching out his hand at the same time. Nice to meet you too.
Gu Ning.
Gu Ning shook his hand lightly. Then, can we see the king's green now, miss? Qin Yifan asked without ado. Sure, Gu Ning said. She used her backpack as the cover to pull out the king's green from the telepathic eye space. The emerald hadn't been wrapped and packed at all. Qin Yifan and his workers were shocked again. If this was a real king's green, wasn't she afraid that it would be scratched? Qin Yifan took the emerald then started to identify it. Qin Yifan was born in a family of jade. He had grown up with all kinds of jade and was an expert to some extent. Though the king's green was rare, he had seen it before. The king's green was dark green, which was the most valuable green color among emeralds. Under the light, the king's green shined in a special dark green. It looked like dark blue sometimes, then turned into light green. Its color changed in different lights. After a while, Qin Yifan was sure this one was the real king's green. Qin Yifan was more than excited now. His hands were shaking even. This is real. The real king's green. Since it's real, please give me a price, Mr. Qin. Gu Ning had classes this afternoon. She didn't want to spend much time here. No problem. Qin Yifan actually wanted to close this deal more than Gu Ning. He wanted to own the king's green himself. But Miss Gu, may I ask the source of this emerald? Qin Yifan needed to know whether this emerald was from a legal source, so he wouldn't get into any trouble because of it. Gu Ning understood, so she didn't feel offended. Please don't worry, it is from an absolute legal source, Gu Ning said. Hearing this, Qin Yifan was relieved. From the size and weight of this emerald, the market price would be over 10 million yuan. I will pay 10 million yuan for it. What would you say, Miss Gu? Although Gu Ning kind of knew the price of the king's green, she was amazed by Qin Yifan's offer. Gu Ning could sell it for an even higher price in the market, but she was satisfied with Qin Yifan's offer. If she had brought it to another jewelry store, she probably wouldn't get such a generous offer. 10 million yuan were beyond her anticipation. Gu Ning was satisfied, of course. Then they need to sign an agreement and transfer the money. Once the agreement had been signed, both sides couldn't regret. Gu Ning had signed the agreement and got the money, then was about to leave. Qin Yifan stopped her on her way out. Miss Gu, this is my name card. If you have any other emeralds of great quality, please feel free to call me. Qin Yifan suddenly had the feeling that this girl wasn't an ordinary teenager. Besides, Gu Ning's good manners had impressed him. Sure. Gu Ning accepted his name card willingly. She didn't need to tell him her phone number because it was on the contract. Qin Yifan didn't bring his sight back until Gu Ning disappeared. He barely could look away from the king's green in his hand. Don't tell the chairman about this. I want to surprise him, Qin Yifan said to his staff. His father's 60th birthday was around the corner. He wanted to carve a small object from this king's green and give it to his father as a birthday gift. Qin Yifan's father ran the business of jade. He had seen many kinds of jade. However, the king's green was too rare that even Qin Yifan's father didn't have one. Though Gu Ning pretended to be calm, she felt nervous indeed. 2 million. To be honest, she had never had that much money in hands in her last lifetime because of the control of the Tang family. Gu Ning was nervous, excited and couldn't believe it was true. She had checked the message several times, then accepted the fact. Gu Ning deleted the message afterwards in case someone else would find out. Though 2 million were a lot for Gu Ning, it wasn't enough for a startup. She decided to use the 2 million as the fund of stone gambling. Gu Ning had searched the internet. The stone gambling market in City G was the nearest one to City F. It took an hour of flight to get there. Gu Ning made a decision that she was going to City G this weekend. Without doubt, Gu Ning wanted to start up her business from the jewelry industry. She had jade eyes and could gain money without risking anything of her own. Jewelry industry was just the beginning. Other industries would be involved in the future. The Tang family was involved in the real estate and entertainment industries. Gu Ning was determined to take part in those two industries. She was going to win the Tang family. Gu Ning also knew she must take it slowly. It wasn't easy to do a successful business. She needed both money and resources. For example, if she planned to establish a jewelry company, she had to prepare a lot for it. First was the source, then the store. After that, she needed to register a company. If she didn't know someone who was in charge, she wouldn't be able to finish it within a month. Workers like designers, managers, and engraving artists were also needed. She was still a student now. It wasn't practical for her to manage the company on her own. Thinking of all these, Gu Ning felt burdened, but she enjoyed it. Moreover, after she went back home from City G with a large amount of money, she would tell Gu Man something about what had happened. And she would buy Gu Man and the family of Gu Qing a house separately. She also wanted Gu Man to quit her job, which was tiring and only paid peanuts. If Gu Man was willing to be a housewife, Gu Ning was fine with that. If her mother wanted to develop her own interests, Gu Ning would support her mother too. Gu Man could open a small store, and hired someone to look after it for her. She could visit the store and work for a while if she liked. All Gu Ning wanted was to let her mother live a relaxing life. As for the family of Gu Qing, Gu Ning wouldn't support them the way she supported Gu Man. She would only financially supported them if they needed. If they wanted to open a shop or a startup, Gu Ning was willing to help them without payback. It was still early. Gu Ning went to a bookstore. She bought several books on jade and stones. Then she put those books into the telepathic eye space in a washroom. After that, she left the commercial building and went straight to her school by taxi. When Gu Ning was back at school, it was 2:20 p.m. and 10 minutes away from the class. Gu Ning was on time. However, Gu Ning encountered Qin Zheng and Gu Xiaoxiao when she went upstairs. The minute Gu Xiaoxiao saw Gu Ning, she held Qin Zheng's arm and gave Gu Ning a provocative look. Gu Ning was speechless. Did Gu Xiaoxiao really believe she still likes Qin Zheng? Probably in Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes, Gu Ning had liked Qin Zheng so much in the past, and it wasn't possible for her to forget him within a short time. Even though Qin Zheng had broken her heart, it took time to recover from the pain. Unfortunately, Gu Ning was different now. Qin Zheng was merely a stranger to her. Accordingly, Gu Ning ignored them, going straight upstairs. Gu Xiaoxiao was mad though, for she didn't see Gu Ning being upset. But she still believed Gu Ning was pretending to be calm. Qin Zheng, on the contrary, was extremely upset. Though he didn't like Gu Ning, he couldn't accept the fact that the girl, who had loved him so much, would ignore him suddenly. Qin Zheng was a selfish boy. He enjoyed being admired, and he was proud of himself being popular. The minute Gu Ning walked into the classroom, Xiao Feifei looked at her unkindly. Honestly, Gu Ning was so sick of it. Yumixi immediately asked Gu Ning when she sat down. "Gu Ning, how's everything going?" "Very well," Gu Ning replied. The first class was English class. The teacher unexpectedly found fault with Gu Ning. Gu Ning knew the teacher did it on purpose for a reason. It was said that their English teacher, Chan Ming, was Chan Ziyao's uncle. Chan Ziyao must have told Chan Ming to pick on Gu Ning. "Gu Ning, translate this sentence into English," Chan Ming said. Gu Ning was well known for her poor English. Chan Ming deliberately asked her to translate a whole paragraph. Even the student with the highest level of English in their class wouldn't be able to that. If one could translate 2/3, he or she would do a fantastic job already. Thus, everyone knew Chan Ming was intentionally finding fault with Gu Ning. Although not knowing the reason, Xiao Feifei and her friends were all pleased to see that. However, Gu Ning stood up calmly with confidence. A paragraph of authentic English came out from Gu Ning's mouth, which shocked everyone. Even Chan Ming, who was the English teacher, couldn't do the same. Gu Ning was poor in English before, but now Gu Ning was different. English was her second language because she had received the training abroad in her last incarnation. In a foreign country for 10 years, it was fair enough that she could speak authentic English. If you didn't look at her face, you would mistake her for a native English speaker. After the shock, Xiao Feifei and her friends were utterly upset with envy and jealousy. Why? How come Gu Ning's English became so good? Chun Ming wore a displeased face. He now felt he had embarrassed himself. He had intended to pick on Gu Ning and remain decent at the same time. Though he was unhappy, he had to admit that Gu Ning had done a better job than him. So, he gave up his plan afterwards to save face. After the class, Yumixi looked at Gu Ning with great admiration and excitement. Gu Ning, I have no idea that your English is so good. I can teach you if you want.
Gu Ning sighed.
Of course, please. Yumixi was thrilled because her English was poor as well. So what? The poor girl is always the poor girl, no matter how good her English is. Xiao Feifei couldn't stand that Gu Ning had won again. In her eyes, a poor girl could never change her fate. Exactly. Yang Yulu and Wu Qingya agreed. They had been with Xiao Feifei for too long to have a clear understanding of themselves. Gu Ning didn't care at all, while Yumixi felt attacked. The minute Chun Ming went back to his office, he sent a message to Chen Xiao saying Gu Ning's English was too good to pick on. Chen Xiao received the message, feeling irritated and disappointed. But Chun Ming clearly told her it wouldn't work, so she had to give up. The afternoon classes passed quickly. Before Gu Ning and Yumixi left their classroom, Muku was already standing outside waiting for them, along with noisy discussions from many girls. Wow, he's Muku from the first classroom. Why is he here? Is he here for a girl in our class? Who will she be? I'm jealous. Exactly, I hope he's here for me. In your dreams. You're definitely not his type. Though Muku wasn't the most handsome boy in their school, he was outstanding enough. He was good at studying and basketball plus a great family background, thus he was famous in 12th grade. Muku, who are you here for? Gu Ning and Yumixi went outside. Meanwhile, Xiao Feifei walked to Muku and asked him the question. Xiao Feifei looked shy. She now was nothing like the arrogant girl in normal days.
Gu Ning instantlik nou Xiao Feifei liket muke.
Unfortunately, Muku didn't like her. I'm here for. Muku wasn't arrogant nor gentle, but he treated others with good manners. Thus he didn't ignore Xiao Feifei's question. But before he could answer the question, he saw Gu Ning and Yumixi coming out. He immediately walked to them and left Xiao Feifei alone. Hey boss Mixi, let's go dine together. Boss? Everyone around was astonished, and their eyes all rounded in surprise. They glanced at Muku then Gu Ning. What? Boss? Why did Muku call Gu Ning boss? What was going on? Let's go. Gu Ning ignored everyone who was in shock, and left with Muku together with Yumixi. After Gu Ning and her friends were gone for a while, everyone then got their mind back and started to gossip. What? Did I hear it right? Muku called Gu Ning his boss. You've heard it right because we all have heard it. But it's so unreal. What has happened? Who knows? Does Muku like Gu Ning? Though Gu Ning is poor, she is pretty. Then why did Muku call her his boss? Probably it's their way of romance. At the same time, Xiao Feifei was more than annoyed. She yelled to herself in her heart with anger. She liked Muku so much. Why would the boy choose Gu Ning? Gu Ning was nobody. She was merely a poor girl, and wasn't qualified to compare with Xiao Feifei.
Obviously, Xiao Feifei believet muke admiret Gu Ning.
She wouldn't accept the fact, and she was determined to pay Gu Ning back. But who would be the one to pay for it was still an unclear answer. Gu Ning apparently wasn't the one. Gu Ning couldn't care less about how people might gossip. 3 of them went straight to the second floor. This meal was on Muku as well. Yumixi felt a little uncomfortable, but Gu Ning was totally at ease. Qin Zheng Zhang Yiming Fu Mingliang, Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao were all rich kids. They all came to the private cafeteria to eat. When Gu Ning and her friends arrived, The two groups met each other. Seeing Muku was with Guning, Qinzheng and his friends were all in shock. After the shock, Zhang Yiming opened his mouth with intense dislike. Muku, why are you with her? The her word had been stressed with discrimination. Hearing this, Muku frowned with dissatisfaction in his eyes. It's none of your business that I'm with whom, Muku replied unfriendly. Fu Mingliang immediately shouted in surprise. Jesus, do you like Guning? How is it possible? She's a poor girl. She can never be with you. Apparently Fu Mingliang also believed Muku liked Guning, to which he didn't want to hide his dislike at all. Shut your mouth. Muku was annoyed. Guning was his boss, and an extremely important figure in his heart. He couldn't tolerate someone else attack her before his face. Muku looked coldly at Fu Mingliang. He was likely to fight. Fu Mingliang, if you dare to say something like that, I'll beat you.
Muku's behavior successfully irritated Fu Mingliang.
He shouted angrily to Muku. Muku, what is wrong with you? Do you really want to beat your brothers for that girl? Fu Mingliang's shout attracted people around them. Interesting, Muku laughed in a sarcastic way. I honestly don't want to make friends with you. You're a bunch of bullies who enjoy humiliating an innocent classmate. You all rely on your parents to live a wealthy, glorious life. And you're proud of it? Shame on you. Try to be independent sometimes. Muku had attacked them all, and raised dissatisfaction among them. Chen Xiao opened her mouth first, because she still remembered that Guning had slapped her face yesterday. She said, "What's wrong with us calling her a poor girl? She is a poor girl. And what's wrong with us relying on our parents? That's because we all have a wealthy and powerful family. Exactly, she is born poor. That's pathetic." Gu Xiaoxiao immediately followed. Muku, how about you then? You are running a jewelry store now. Didn't you ask your parents for money? Fu Mingliang was displeased and he was jealous as well. Yes, he was being jealous. Although Fu Mingliang had no interest in a startup and he had no intention to work hard, he was still jealous of Muku's profitable business. He didn't want Muku to be better than him. Knowing this, Guning was surprised. She didn't expect Muku would start up a business at such a young age. A jewelry store, it seemed she had encountered her peer. So what? At least my family only helped me with money, that's all. Muku wasn't showing off. He was telling the truth. Guning supported Muku in her heart. She had to admit that Muku was a boy of determination and ability. If it was possible, she even wanted to cooperate with him. Fu Mingliang was still displeased, but he knew the fact as well. All of a sudden, he couldn't argue back. Fu Mingliang gave up while Gu Xiaoxiao continued. Ji Guning, yesterday you said you would be rich. Does it mean that you found yourself a rich boyfriend like Muku? Well, Muku indeed is from a rich family. However, you can never marry into such a rich family. Muku will dump you sooner or later. Then, God bless, you won't end up like your mother who was pregnant when she was just a freshman, and had been dumped by a man and dropped out of school. Now she... Before Gu Xiaoxiao could finish, she screamed out loud, which shocked everyone in the canteen, especially those who were standing around her. They almost went deaf by the scream. Now, right on Gu Xiaoxiao's head was an upside-down plate. The food and oil were sliding down along her hair, face and clothes. Gu Xiaoxiao had egg on her face. At the same time, everyone was staring at Guning in shock. They all saw clearly that Guning had thrown the plate straight to Gu Xiaoxiao. The plate even had turned several circles in the air. Then right fell on Gu Xiaoxiao's head. Was this a coincidence? No, it couldn't be. Could Guning do kung fu? Thinking of that, most people looked at Guning in a different way, especially those who were kung fu lovers. Wow, boss, you're so awesome. I want to learn this move. Muku raised his voice with excitement. He admired Guning now more than ever. Boss? The crowd was shocked once more. Muku called Guning his boss? What was going on? Guning ignored Muku, fixing her eyes on Gu Xiaoxiao with coldness. She warned. Gu Xiaoxiao, shut your smelly mouth. If you dare to say another word to humiliate my mother, I'll beat you to the ground. What the F***ck? Gu Ning, I'm going to kill you. Gu Xiaoxiao wouldn't listen to Gu Ning's warning. She went crazy now and ran to Gu Ning. The plate on her head fell down on the floor at the same time.
Kuningsneered.
She casually pulled a table nearby to her front. Then Gu Xiaoxiao hit straight on the table. The crowd was shocked for the third time. The table was heavy. How could Gu Ning easily moved it? Now everyone believed Gu Ning must be a master of kung fu. Gu Xiaoxiao was Qin Zheng's girlfriend. Seeing Gu Xiaoxiao had been treated so badly, he felt embarrassed as well. He had to stand up for Gu Xiaoxiao now. Gu Ning, you're going too far, he criticized. Saying this, he instantly went to help Gu Xiaoxiao stand up. Interesting. Gu Ning sneered again. She looked at him in a meaningful way. Really? Compared with what you've done to me, am I really going too far? If you don't mind, I'm willing to tell the facts to everyone here, and let the crowd be the judge. Gu Ning had no intention to continue actually. However, since those people wouldn't leave her alone, she decided to fight till the end. Qin Zheng was cornered. He absolutely knew what they had done to Gu Ning. What had they done to Gu Ning? Insiders all knew what Gu Ning was pointing to, but those outsiders were all curious about what had happened. The glances of curiosity moved around among Gu Ning, Gu Xiaoxiao and Qin Zheng. Mu Ku was an insider, while Yu Mixi knew half of the truth. Both of them were mad. Let bygones be bygones. You're fine now anyway. Qin Zheng was worried that Gu Ning would tell the truth. Gu Ning felt like laughing. She argued him back with the same theory. In that case, what has happened just then can also be forgiven, right? Then Qin Zheng had no reason to blame her. Qin Zheng was dissatisfied, but wasn't able to argue back. Gu Xiaoxiao, on the contrary, felt aggrieved. It was impossible that she would forgive Gu Ning. Gu Ning, you dared to throw the plate to me. You can never get away with it, Gu Xiaoxiao said with obvious hatred, throwing a plate on a table to Gu Ning directly. They stood so close. There was no way to stop it. Everyone was watching the plate flying to Gu Ning. Though Gu Ning had shown her ability just then, others were still worried that Gu Ning wouldn't be able to escape away from the plate, because the distance was so short. However, before everyone could see it clearly, bam, the plate was broken. All of them were amazed by the scene before them. Gu Ning even hit the plate, which was quickly flying to her, with a fist. The plate was hit broken afterwards, while Gu Ning's hand stayed the same. Wow, holy awesome. Mu Ku looked at Gu Ning with admiration. He couldn't describe how much he admired Gu Ning now. Everyone acclaimed as well. Yu. Gu Xiaoxiao was literally scared this time. She stepped backwards at once, staring at Gu Ning in horror, like she was looking at a beast. How come? How was it possible? Since when Gu Ning had become so powerful? Gu Xiaoxiao, I've warned you yesterday to stay away from me. You didn't listen. Since you won't leave me alone, I'm willing to have a little fun, Gu Ning said coldly. You? Gu Xiaoxiao apparently was frightened by Gu Ning. She gave up for now but still felt displeased. She said viciously, Gu Ning, I'm going to tell my dad and grandma that you've bullied me. I'll let grandma kick you all out of the old house. I want you all to be homeless. Gu Xiaoxiao was the center in her family. If she insisted, her grandma probably would follow her order. We don't live in the old house for free. We pay the rent. We can live wherever we want after we leave the old house. Gu Ning didn't care at all. She didn't plan to stay in there for much longer anyway. If they were going to move out of the old house today, she and Gu Man would stay in the hotel first. When she came back from City G, she would immediately buy a new house. Boss, you don't need to worry. I can help you find a house. Mu Ku supported Gu Ning. You? Gu Xiaoxiao was more than annoyed now. She clenched her teeth and said, Fine, very well, Gu Ning, let's go and see. You will regret. Then she glared at Gu Ning, turning around and left. She even ignored Qin Zheng and other friends. Chen Xiao was also displeased to see that Gu Ning had survived. She glared at Gu Ning too. Qin Zheng, Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang were all unhappy. They gave Gu Ning and Mu Ku a meaningful glance, then were gone as well. When they were all gone, the crowd dispersed gradually. Gu Ning and her friends felt disgusted at first, but then cheered up by eating. Gu Xiaoxiao immediately called her mother after she left. Gu Xiaoxiao's mother, Lin Lijuan, was a pushy woman who cared about her own daughter only. Hearing her daughter had been bullied, Lin Lijuan was in a rage. Gu Xiaoxiao added fuel on flames. She told her mother that Gu Ning had picked up a rich boy, behaved immorally and so forth. Lin Lijuan hung up the phone. She instantly sent the driver to pick Gu Xiaoxiao up. Then she called Gu Man to humiliate and blame her for a long time. Lin Lijuan demanded Gu Man that she should let Gu Ning apologize to Gu Xiaoxiao, or this would never end. Gu Man was shocked after hearing what had happened. Gu Ning had hit Gu Xiaoxiao by a plate, and even had slapped her? Gu Man found it was hard to believe, but since Lin Lijuan called her in person, it could be true. Gu Man, at the same time, assumed it wasn't as bad as what Lin Lijuan had said. Even though Gu Ning had beaten Gu Xiaoxiao, she must have done it because Gu Xiaoxiao had irritated her. Gu Man knew Gu Xiaoxiao so well. Gu Xiaoxiao had bullied Gu Ning for countless times ever since she was a little girl. Though Gu Man knew Gu Ning had been bullied, she didn't know how to deal with it. However, what had scared Gu Man more was that Lin Lijuan said Gu Ning had picked up a rich boy and behaved immorally. She couldn't believe Gu Ning would do that, but teenagers fall in love easily in adolescence. Gu Man was really concerned that Gu Ning would have done something wrong. The minute Gu Man hung up the call from Lin Lijuan, she called Gu Ning at once. When Gu Ning received Gu Man's call, they just arrived at the small forest. Ning Ning, your eldest aunt just called me and said you've hit Xiaoxiao by a plate. You even have slapped her? What has happened? Your eldest aunt also said you must apologize to Xiaoxiao or this won't end, Gu Man worriedly inquired. Hearing this, Gu Ning wasn't surprised at all. She knew Gu Xiaoxiao would do this. I did throw a plate to her, but it didn't hit her. The plate was simply upside down on her head and ruined her hair, face and clothes. That's all. I didn't beat her neither. She has humiliated me for many times. An upside-down plate wasn't a serious punishment, to be honest, Gu Ning explained calmly. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. And the apologies, I did nothing wrong, so I won't apologize. Gu Ning refused to apologize without hesitation. Gu Man knew Lin Lijuan had exaggerated the facts. Now hearing Gu Ning's explanation, Gu Man believed she was right. Gu Man couldn't help feeling bad after she found out the reason why Gu Ning had thrown the plate out. She blamed herself for being useless, or her daughter wouldn't be bullied that often. A mother would protect her daughter naturally. Although Gu Man still thought Gu Ning had gone too far by throwing the plate, she believed Gu Ning had done nothing wrong. Thus she didn't force Gu Ning to apologize. Ning Ning, you're going to attend the college entrance exam soon. You need to focus on your study, and don't fall in love at such a young age. Gu Man intended to ask Gu Ning whether she had picked up a rich boy, but she was afraid Gu Ning would felt hurt, so Gu Man didn't ask her directly. Gu Ning was a smart girl. She knew the real intention of Gu Man. Gu Xiaoxiao must have badmouthed her behind her back. Mom, I know Gu Xiaoxiao must have told my eldest aunt something bad about me, but Mom, you need to trust me. I'm not the kind of girl who doesn't have sense of self-esteem. Great, I trust you. Though Gu Man was still concerned, she chose to believe Gu Ning. After a while, Gu Ning hung up. They went into a remote part of the small forest, in case others would see them. Training of Kung Fu was a long-term practice. Although Mu Ku had learned several moves, he needed to practice often. Thus Mu Ku and Gu Ning continued to train the way they had done yesterday. As for Mixi, because she wasn't physically strong enough now, She couldn't directly fight with Guning to train and practice. Guning let her do horse stance first. When Guning and her friends were focused on training, a post about her raised a fierce discussion in their school forum. Someone had taken a video of what had just happened in the canteen and uploaded it onto the forum. Gee, this can't be real. The plate has been perfectly thrown ahead, and the table is too heavy to move. How can she easily pull it? The plate as well. How can she hit it broken at once? An ordinary person can never do that. I believe this female student must be a master of Kung Fu. A master of Kung Fu? I don't believe you. You must have read too many action novels. But I have to say this female student is quite somebody. Oh my. I've met this female student before, in the small forest yesterday. She was fighting with another tall, strong male student. The boy has been beaten down on the ground. I wanted to take a video of them, but the female student has discovered and threatened me away. Please tell us, what did she say? Please, please, I'm waiting online. Please, please, please. She said, do you want to fight with me? F***ck, I would never risk my life for that, and I ran away in horror. Everyone laughed and teased. There were both complimentary and acid comments. I think she just wants to gain attention. Exactly, people nowadays are eager to be famous. I agree. If she really do Kung Fu, she can have a fight with Chu Pei Han and prove to us. Seeing those acid remarks, those who admired Guning were displeased. They immediately retorted, are you blind? Try throwing a plate and see if it turns and aims at the target by yourself. And pull the table to move if you can. Exactly. Shut your mouth if you can't do it yourself. I think they are being jealous. They just can't stand the fact that Guning is better than them. Can't agree more. Some girls are so jealous of others. Brothers, we need to be clear-sighted and stay away from those girls to protect ourselves. Sure. I prefer to stay single forever rather than be with a pretentious bitch. Agree. Agree. Those boys were so evil. They soon conquered the group of girls who had bad-mouthed Guning, but secretly guided those girls' anger to Guning. Right at that moment, a comment attracted everyone's attention. Is she really that powerful? I'm Hao Ran, a senior from the 7th classroom. I now challenge this female student to have a fight with me. Anyone who knows this female student, tell me about her. Immediately, the discussion became fiercer. Hao Ran, the senior student from the 7th classroom, was a well-known figure in their school, but he was notorious for his bad behaviors. He had involved himself in fights and riots, behaving even worse than Chu Pei Han. If he hadn't had a powerful background as well, he would have been expelled from the school too. Now Guning was in trouble. Those who had criticized Guning just then instantly added fuel to the fire. Before long, Guning's information was leaked. Whoever had leaked Guning's information must hate her very much, and wanted to see her in danger. After Hao Ran had challenged Guning, some felt worried, some looked forward to it, and some just enjoyed building their happiness on others' suffering. There were many students gathered outside the door of the 4th classroom. Soon Qin Zheng, Zhang Yiming, Fu Mingliang and Chen Xiao were included. They all came for Guning. To be exact, they were here for Hao Ran and Guning. Among those onlookers, Qin Zheng and his friends along with Xiao Feifei, and her friends were most excited to see what would happen next. If Gu Xiaoxiao had known the news, she must feel regret going home so early and missing the drama. In the passage, 3 boys who were leaning against the guardrails were most noticeable. They weren't good-looking actually, but because no one dared to stay closer to them, they were noticeable then. Although the 3 boys weren't handsome, they weren't ugly at all. They behaved in an arrogant and aggressive way, which showed they were bad boys. Hao Ran, Guning probably is too afraid to come. A boy who was standing at the right among those 3 male students opened his mouth. There were only a few minutes away from the evening class. Guning was still absent. Probably she was frightened. She can't hide forever unless she drops out of school. The boy in the middle, who was Hao Ran, said with disdain. Shall we wait any longer? The evening class is about to begin in a few minutes. A boy who was standing at the left asked. Yes, why not? Probably she intends to come until we're gone when the evening class is about to begin, Hao Ran said. The minute Gu Ning and her friends went out of the stairs, they saw many people around outside of fourth classroom. Something must had happened. No matter what had happened, the evening class was about to begin, and Gu Ning together with Yu Mixi had to walk through. Muka's classroom wasn't in the same direction of Gu Ning's, but out of curiosity, he followed Gu Ning walking ahead. Someone immediately found Gu Ning was coming. Chen Xiao opened her mouth at once. Gee, isn't this Gu Ning? Who said she's scared? She's quite awesome. Chen Xiao did it on purpose to push Gu Ning into the center of trouble. The more she complimented Gu Ning, the unhappier Hao Ran would be. When Gu Ning showed up, Chen Xiao directly opened her phone, starting to shoot. She wanted to send the video to Gu Xiaoxiao after it was over. Hearing that, Gu Ning knew they weren't kind people. However, Gu Ning assumed Chen Xiao and her friends were those who came here to cause her trouble. You're Gu Ning, right? Hao Ran walked to Gu Ning and asked with certainty. Yes. What's up? Gu Ning answered calmly with confidence. She wasn't afraid at all. Hao Ran, what do you want to do? Seeing Hao Ran being here, Mu Kuo, who followed Gu Ning, felt something must be wrong. He immediately stepped forward to protect Gu Ning. He had no idea why Hao Ran was here for Gu Ning, but he did know Hao Ran was here not because of Chen Xiao. Hao Ran was surprised that Mu Ku would protect Gu Ning, but he still continued. I saw the video about what had happened in the canteen on our school's forum. Everyone says Gu Ning is powerful. I disagree though. Thus, I'm here to challenge Gu Ning to have a fight with me. Does she dare to accept my challenge? What? Hearing that, Mu Ku and Yu Mixi was shocked. They all looked at Gu Ning with worry at once. Gu Ning instead remained calm. The boy was here to challenge her. Gu Ning even assumed he was here because of Chen Xiao. Mu Ku quietly swore at the person who had uploaded the video. The person apparently wanted to cause Gu Ning trouble. Gu Ning was displeased as well, but she was more interested than terrified in Hao Ran's challenge. Gu Ning was very familiar with Hao Ran's name, because Hao Ran was as notorious as Chu Pei Han in their school. He was often involved in fights and riots, and always absent in classes. Hao Ran had received as many punishments as Chu Pei Han, but he couldn't have a high score like Chu Pei Han. He was terrible at studying. Hao Ran was from a super rich family. His family was the third richest family with dozens of millions of assets in City F. Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping, the three of them was a famous gang in their school. Gu Ning had also heard something about Qin Zixuan's and Zhang Tianping's background. Qin Zixuan was a son of the authorities, but Gu Ning didn't know his father's position. As for Zhang Tianping, it was said that he was an orphan. Those three boys had become good friends in a fight. Though they had very different background, they were truly intimate friends. Gu Ning had planned in her mind after she found out who those boys were. Hao Ran, how can you even beat a girl? Mu Ku was extremely annoyed. Though he believed Gu Ning's ability, these three boys weren't easy to handle. If she were an ordinary girl, it may look like I'm beating her, but since she does kung fu, we can learn from each other. Hao Ran didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Yes, if Gu Ning had been a common girl, he would never beat her. But the video had proved that she wasn't weak at all. Mu Ku was mad. Before he could continue, Gu Ning interrupted. What if I win and what if I lose? Gu Ning asked. If you can win, I can do a thing for you, but if I win, you must do a thing for us. Relax, I won't let you do something immoral, Hao Ran replied. Hao Ran was a boy with principles. Sure, challenge accepted, but I want more than just a thing, Gu Ning said. The crowd was amazed by the result that Gu Ning accepted the challenge and even wanted to add chips. Although everyone believed Gu Ning was quite someone in the video, Hao Ran was well known for his outstanding ability in a fight. No one thought Gu Ning would win. Was Gu Ning being confident, or was she thinking too highly of herself? Boss. Muku called her with worry, but Gu Ning stopped him by a glance. Tell me, what do you want? Hao Ran was surprised Gu Ning would accept his challenge without hesitation. He now was more curious than surprised about Gu Ning's condition. He didn't know whether Gu Ning was being confident or arrogant, but he appreciated her attitude. 1 verses 3 If I lose, I'll do 3 things for you, but if I win, 3 of you must call me boss, and be loyal to me afterwards till the entrance exam is over, Gu Ning said airily while others were all in shock. What? 1 verses 3? The losers must call her boss? Gu Ning was so confident. After the shock, Hao Ran and his friends were irritated by Gu Ning's words. It was a humiliation to them. How could he call a girl boss? You want to be our boss? Interesting. Hao Ran sneered. Exactly, what the hell are you? Gu Ning being confident is good, but don't be too over. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping added in anger. I know who I am. Whether I'm being confident or arrogant, it's none of your business. At least I'm not afraid. If you're cowards and don't dare to accept the challenge, then you lose. Gu Ning glanced through Hao Ran and his friends with obvious provocation. You. Hao Ran and his friends felt shamed after that. Their dignity didn't allow them to be hesitated. Cowards. We've never ever been cowards. Challenge accepted. Hao Ran answered with anger. Hao Ran was always the decision-maker among them. Since Hao Ran accepted, the other two all agreed. Besides, they didn't want to be cowards neither. Very well. Then I'll see you at 1 p.m. tomorrow in the small forest, Gu Ning said with satisfaction, which made Muku feel that she had everything in control. Well, he should believe in Gu Ning. Since Gu Ning was willing to accept the challenge, she must be confident to win. After what had happened during the past days, Yumixi knew Gu Ning would never change her mind once she had made her decision. Yumixi also remained quiet. She only needed to believe her friend. Then, Gu Ning directly turned around and went inside her classroom, leaving everyone behind. Hao Ran and his friends snorted, then were gone as well. The crowd dispersed afterwards since the major roles had all gone. There was a glance of viciousness in Chen Xiao's eyes when she watched Gu Ning walking away. She felt disappointed when Gu Ning stayed calm. Thus she hoped more that Gu Ning would lose tomorrow. The worse the better. Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang had the same thought, while Qin Zheng's feelings were complicated. He wanted to see Gu Ning learn her lesson, but he also felt concerned for her. When Gu Ning entered the classroom, her classmates looked at her with worry, anticipation, but more with unkindness, especially Xiao Feifei and her friends. Xiao Feifei wanted to mock her, but the bell rang. Thus she had to close her mouth. Gu Ning, come out here for a moment. The head teacher asked Gu Ning to come out the minute she arrived. Gu Ning knew it must be because of what had happened tonight. The minute Gu Ning walked out of the classroom, the head teacher asked her in anger, "Why did you do that in the canteen? Why did you hit another schoolmate? And why did you accept the challenge of Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping, who are from the 7th classroom? Do you know this is a big deal now, which has a bad impact on both you and our class?" Facing the head teacher's questions in anger, Gu Ning wasn't mad at all. She explained with patience instead. "Professor Zhang, it was because Gu Xiaoxiao has humiliated me and my mother first, then I hit her in the canteen. How can I be able to tolerate the humiliation like that? As for Hao Ran and his friends, they will never leave me alone if I didn't accept the challenge. I would rather face the trouble at the very beginning." Zhang Qiuhua actually knew Gu Ning's condition. She knew other students always bullied Gu Ning. However, since nothing severe had happened, she ignored all of them. It was understandable that Gu Ning would fight back. Though she believed it had been too over, Gu Ning had made the right choice for herself. Zhang Qiuhua didn't know what to say. But she still couldn't accept the fact that Gu Ning had accepted the challenge of Hao Ran. Gu Ning, can you, a girl, win over the three boys? Besides, the school won't allow students to fight. You'll be punished for that, and our class also will be criticized, Zhang Qiuhua said. Hearing that, Gu Ning was a little shocked. She totally forgot she would be punished for fighting, and her class would also be criticized for her behavior. But I've promised them already. If I regret, Hao Ran will revenge on me. Gu Ning felt she had been cornered. My blood is boiling now. Gu Ning really pissed Zhang Qiuhua off. Although Gu Ning was the reason of all these troubles, Hao Ran was the major cause. Zhang Qiuhua couldn't blame Gu Ning for all. She also wasn't that cold-blooded to see Gu Ning revenged by Hao Ran only because Gu Ning regretted. If Hao Ran was going to take revenge on Gu Ning, even the school couldn't stop him. How about this? I can go have the fight with Hao Ran outside the school, then no one will be punished, Gu Ning said. You? Zhang Qiuhua was still displeased. Gu Ning, how could you be so dumb? How can you be so sure that you can win Hao Ran and his friends? What if you're hurt and your mother will be worried? Can your family afford the medical treatment? Zhang Qiuhua had told the plain truth. She had no intention to insult Gu Ning, but it's for Gu Ning's good. Gu Ning understood her teacher cared about her, so she wasn't annoyed. Gu Ning replied with pure confidence, "Please don't worry about that. I am going to win them, really." It was hard for Zhang Qiuhua to believe, but she knew it was meaningless to continue this topic, so she said, "Good luck." After that, Zhang Qiuhua stopped talking to Gu Ning and left in anger. Gu Ning shrugged her shoulders resignedly and went back to her classroom. Although everyone in the classroom was all ears to listen to Zhang Qiuhua criticizing Gu Ning, Zhang Qiuhua kept her voice low, and no one actually heard anything. They only saw Zhang Qiuhua leave in anger. Gu Ning instead was super calm from the very beginning to the end, and wasn't sad or scared of being criticized at all. Everyone was puzzled. When Gu Ning walked inside, most of the students focused on her face, wanting to figure out what had happened. Because the head teacher was gone, the classroom wasn't that quiet any longer. It wasn't one of the top classes, thus those students didn't enjoy studying very much. "Hey Gu Ning, are you sure you're going to win them?" A male student sat in front of Gu Ning, turning back to ask her in doubt. "Exactly. 1 versus 3. That's really something." Another male student added with admiration, "You have the great gesture. Do you have the same great ability?" Someone poured cold water on Gu Ning. "Exactly, I'm not positive about that," another one agreed. Most of the students didn't believe Gu Ning would succeed. Gu Ning ignored them, but Yumixi couldn't stay quiet anymore. She retorted for the first time, "I believe in Gu Ning. I think she'll win." Gu Ning smiled a little. Yumixi made her progress. "So what? You believe in her doesn't mean she'll win," a classmate argued. "Exactly, I don't believe," someone said. "We'll all find out tomorrow noon. It's too early to deny Gu Ning's ability now. Let's wait and see," Yumixi argued. Those who weren't positive turned quiet gradually. Some still wanted to pour cold water, but the head teacher returned. They had to close their mouth. In the house of the Gu family, a room was decorated in a dreamy way like it was a princess's room. Gu Xiaoxiao was in a pink nightgown, lying on a big pink bed with a phone in her hands. She was watching the video sent by Chen Ziyao, and felt it was a pity that she hadn't been there herself. Gu Xiaoxiao had the same reaction as Chen Ziyao. She felt extremely unhappy about Gu Ning's confidence, and didn't believe Gu Ning could win Hao Ran and his friends. She was gloating now. She couldn't wait to see Gu Ning beaten down on the ground tomorrow noon. Moreover, she was waiting for the apologies from Gu Ning. Gu Xiaoxiao decided to spare no effort to pick on Gu Ning. If Gu Ning wouldn't apologize or she wasn't satisfied, she would persuade her grandma to kick Gu Ning and her mother out of the old house. The next morning, Gu Xiaoxiao waited at the stairs for Gu Ning. She wanted to seize the chance to make fun of Gu Ning. After a long time, Gu Ning was still absent. Gu Xiaoxiao was losing her patience. The morning class is about to begin. Is Guning terrified to come to school today? Gu Xiaoxiao assumed. Who knows? Chen Ziao was sure. It was 2 minutes away from the morning class. Guning appeared with Muku and Yumixi. Seeing Muku, Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao was more jealous of Guning now. Muku had been their friend before, but now he chose Guning over them. Besides, Muku was from a better family than them. They wanted to cooperate with Muku. Unexpectedly, Muku would stand up for Guning against them. Muku and Yumixi felt unpleasant when they noticed Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao were here. Guning stayed calm as usual. Guning, I've heard that you're going to fight with those 3 boys this noon. 1 versus 3 even. You're bold and confident enough to do so, but are you really being confident? Or you're simply arrogant? Gu Xiaoxiao said unkindly. I'm always confident. Guning didn't want to hide her confidence. You? Gu Xiaoxiao hated Guning most when she stayed so calm before the storm came. Gu Xiaoxiao wanted to tear Guning apart. Guning, keep pretending. I'll go and see how you become a loser right before my eyes. And if you don't apologize for what you've done yesterday, you'll pay for it. Gu Xiaoxiao clenched her teeth out of anger and hatred. I will never apologize. Do whatever you want to. I'm waiting, Guning replied airily. Then she ignored Gu Xiaoxiao, throwing her a provocative look and walked away. You? Gu Xiaoxiao was mad. She didn't expect Guning would dare to do that. She shouted at Guning back. Great Guning, you'll regret. Guning, is it really going to be all right? Yumixi asked in worry. She was concerned Guning and her mother would be homeless. Don't worry. It's fine, Guning replied. Gradually, Yumixi had pure trust in Guning. Since Guning had said it would be fine, she would not doubt it. Muka gave Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao a cold glance, then went back to his classroom. Some students still believed Guning would not come to school today. When Guning showed up, they were all surprised. Wasn't Guning afraid at all? In the morning, Guning had received many curious looks from others, their head teacher included. They all wanted to see fear from Guning's face but failed. Guning was at ease like nothing had happened. When the last class in the morning was about to over, the head teacher couldn't help asking Guning, Are you really that confident? I never do anything without being fully prepared. Guning answered with solemnity. The head teacher had nothing else to say. She left in quietness. The appointed time was 1 p.m. Guning decided to eat first after the classes were over. When Guning and her friends went upstairs, Hao Ran and his friends stopped them. They actually didn't mean to limit Guning's freedom. They simply followed Guning in case she would run away. Guning felt resigned. Could anyone has any trust on her? Do you plan to buy me, your boss, a meal first? Guning looked at them, joking. Guning, don't be so confident. It's too early to say that, Hao Ran retorted. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping glared at Guning at the same time. Actually, those 3 boys weren't aggressive normally. However, whenever they encountered Guning, they were easily irritated. Probably because Guning was being too calm, which made them feel like they hadn't been taken seriously. Or probably because Guning's calmness showed her confidence, which made them feel nervous unconsciously. Therefore, they would fight against her confidence by arguing. Aren't you confident? Guning asked them. You! Hao Ran and his friends suddenly realized Guning had outstanding ability to piss someone off. Everyone around them started to discuss. Guning isn't scared at all. She's even in the mood of joking. Gu Xiaoxiao, Xiao Feifei and their friends all wanted Guning to fail. Seeing Guning being so confident, they were greatly displeased. I think she's pretending, Gu Xiaoxiao said. Exactly, she's merely pretended to be relaxed. Xiao Feifei wanted to mock at Guning, but she restricted herself for Muku was here. However, Muku never glanced at her from the very beginning to the end. Xiao Feifei was disappointed. She wanted to talk to him, but Guning and Yumixi were here as well. Since you're already here, why not? Gu Ning proposed. What? Hao Ran and his friends asked with one accord. I don't want to be punished for fighting inside the school. Thus we'll fight outside. Since we all haven't had meal yet, why don't we have the fight first, and the loser will buy the meal. Plus the precious condition stays the same, Gu Ning said in a provocative way. Very well. Hao Ran and his friends agreed. There's a newly demolished ruin at the opposite side of the back door of our school. There are few people around. Let's go there. Then Gu Ning moved first, followed by Muku and Yumixi. Hao Ran and his friends were behind. The onlookers wouldn't miss that. All of the 40 students in the 4th classroom were here, along with Gu Xiaoxiao and her friends and dozens of students from other classrooms. A group of people moved outside attracted much attention. It wasn't usual to see such a large gathering of students in the school. Many people immediately knew there was going to be a fight. Those cowards all stayed away, while those who wanted to see a drama followed up. Accordingly, a group of dozens of students became a group of hundreds. The security guards of the school also noticed that. But unless someone got hurt, they wouldn't do anything about it. Gu Ning and others went straight to the ruin. Everyone was excited when they arrived at the ruin, pulling out a phone preparing to shoot. Although Muku and Yumixi chose to believe in Gu Ning, they felt anxious. They didn't want her to be injured. Boss fighting. Gu Ning fighting. When Muku and Yumixi tried to encourage Gu Ning, their voices were trembling a little. Just trust me. Gu Ning comforted them. Her determined voice calmed Muku and Yumixi down a lot. Shall we stop when it's necessary, or shall we fight to the end? Before they started, Gu Ning asked. As long as someone fall on the ground, he or she loses. Hao Ran didn't want to go too far. Given that Gu Ning was a girl, Gu Ning had a great impression of Hao Ran's behavior. But she also knew they still didn't take her seriously enough. If one didn't take his opponent seriously, he would lose in any kind of fight. Great, then let's begin. Gu Ning announced the beginning and both sides moved. Gu Ning moved extremely fast. Before everyone could see it clearly, Gu Ning came straight to Zhang Tianping's face. She threw Zhang Tianping over her shoulder without hesitation. Zhang Tianping, who was a tall, strong boy, was easily thrown over by Gu Ning's shoulder to the ground. Everyone was in a shock. Zhang Tianping himself was struck dumb too. He still had no idea what had happened when he was thrown to the floor. Obviously, Gu Ning had seized her chance when Zhang Tianping didn't take her seriously. Those boys were real fighter actually. If they were fully prepared, it would cost Gu Ning more time to deal with them. Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan was totally amazed, but they got their mind back soon. They were astonished in their heart, but never hesitated to move. If they hadn't taken Gu Ning seriously before, now they wouldn't do the same thing. Facing Qin Zixuan's fist, Gu Ning raised hers to his. But when their fists were about to meet each other, Gu Ning suddenly kicked on Qin Zixuan's stomach. Qin Zixuan stepped backwards at short notice, like he had been hit by a heavy object. Luckily, he was strong enough and didn't fall. The crowd was shocked again. Some instantly raised their anticipation of Gu Ning. Those who wanted to see Gu Ning lose were all disappointed now. Hao Ran tried to get Gu Ning down on the ground by attaching her legs with his. Since now Gu Ning stood on the floor with one leg, everyone thought she was going to lose this time. Even Muku and Yumixi took a long breath in. Unexpectedly, Gu Ning brought her another leg back at once, then kicked out at Hao Ran's leg. Hao Ran was unable to stand steadily afterwards. Of course, Gu Ning stepped backwards for a short distance as well. Right at that moment, Qin Zixuan attacked Gu Ning with his fist. Gu Ning didn't escape at all though. She reached out her hand, directly holding Qin Zixuan's fist in her palm. Gu Ning was still a teenage girl. Her hand didn't fully cover Qin Zixuan's fist, but she was powerful enough to stop Qin Zixuan from moving at all. Qin Zixuan didn't panic. He immediately used another hand to hit Gu Ning, but his fist was held by her palm once more. Then before Qin Zixuan would able to attack her again, Gu Ning raised her foot and aimed at his shin. Qin Zixuan lost his balance, falling heavily on the ground. The crowd rounded their eyes in shock again. Within 3 moves, only 3 moves, Qin Zixuan was down on the ground. Qin Zixuan, the boy who normally could fight again around 7 people, now was defeated by Gu Ning within 3 moves. It was hard for anyone of the crowd to accept the fact. At last, only Hao Ran was standing straight. Actually, Hao Ran knew he was going to lose at that moment, but he wouldn't give up without fighting. Thus, he must be more violent than usual. After several rounds, when Hao Ran wasn't able to stand steadily, Gu Ning kicked him right away. But she was caught by him at an important point. The crowd thought Hao Ran was going to win this time. However, Gu Ning used her another foot to grab the ground tightly, turning her body afterwards. Her foot got rid of Hao Ran's hand at once. Then Gu Ning continued to kick. Now, it was too late for Hao Ran to defend himself. He was kicked accurately and fell down. He lost. The best fighter Hao Ran lost the fight within 10 moves. Everyone was more than shocked. They lost really. Hao Ran and his another 2 brothers versus Gu Ning. And the boys lost. Gu Ning had won the game easily too. Nobody would believe what they had just witnessed. Even Muku and Yumixi, who believed in Gu Ning, was completely amazed. Jesus! Did I see it wrong? Gu Ning, she won. I think we must be in a dream. Gu Ning won the game. Exactly. I can't believe my eyes. It's so unreal. But the truth is, not only has Gu Ning won, she also won it so easily. She looked so cool when she was attacking them. Yes, especially the flip, it was so cool. I truly believe Gu Ning is a real master now. For now, no one would question whether Gu Ning was a master of Kung Fu anymore. In ordinary people's eyes, she was. Hao Ran and his friends were still in shock, but they were more qualified than anyone else to admit the truth, because they had been through the whole progress. While Xiao Feifei, Gu Xiaoxiao and their friends were totally unwilling to accept the fact. Xiao Feifei even blurted out, "No, no, no. It's impossible. Hao Ran and his friends must haven't done it with full strength." Even though there were some students who had the same thought, no one dared to say it out. It was a humiliation to Hao Ran and his friends. No one wanted to have bad blood with them. Hao Ran and his friends had lost the fight, which was humiliating enough. Xiao Feifei's words had added fuel on the flames. They were in a rage at once. "Shut your bloody mouth up. Don't think that I'm not one to punch women." Hao Ran shouted at Xiao Feifei in great anger, like he was about to beat her. Xiao Feifei immediately shut her mouth, holding her breath in horror. She looked to Muku, searching for sympathy and comfort. Unfortunately, Muku glared at her, apparently because she had questioned Gu Ning. Right now, Xiao Feifei felt deeply hurt and aggrieved. She started to cry. Xiao Feifei wasn't smart actually. Since she liked Muku, she should never pick on someone he cherished, but she did otherwise. It would only make Muku hate her if she picked on Gu Ning. Hao Ran's shout shut Xiao Feifei and many others' mouth. Gu Xiaoxiao and her friends were included. "Well, I didn't expect it would end so soon. We even came outside the school for it. If it had been for fear of punishment, I don't think we need to waste the time," Gu Ning said, like they had made a mountain out of a molehill. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. Who could know this would end so easily? At the same time, Hao Ran and his friends felt so embarrassed that they even wanted to hide into a crack on the ground. Gu Ning was really powerful. Hao Ran took a deep breath, looking at Gu Ning. Although he felt ashamed after he had lost the fight, he admired Gu Ning after all. Thus, he admitted without further ado, "We lost the game and you're our boss from now on," Hao Ran said with sincerity. "Yes, you're our boss from now on." Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping followed. "Very well," Gu Ning answered. She suddenly said then, "I'm hungry, let's go eat first. Since I'm the winner, I'll make the decision of the food." Gu Ning gave Muku and Yumixi a hint to follow her up. Then she left in a hurry. Gu-ning wasn't hungry actually. She just didn't want to be stared at by a group of people any longer. Since Hao Ran and his friends had already accepted Gu-ning as their boss, they would follow her order, and they never lacked of money. Seeing Gu-ning walking away, Xiao Feifei, Gu Xiaoxiao and their friends' eyes were all full of disappointment and deep hatred. Why did Gu-ning suddenly become so powerful? Chen Xiao, Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang felt disappointed too. At the same time they were also terrified. Gu-ning wasn't only powerful now. She also had the support of Hao Ran and his friends. What if she revenged on them for what they had done to her? Thinking of this, they all felt concerned. Qin Zheng's feelings, meanwhile, ran the gamut of emotions. He slightly regretted breaking up with Gu-ning because the girl was so impressive now. But thinking further, he calmed down. No matter how impressive Gu-ning was, she was still a poor girl, who would not help him for anything, and probably would embarrass him. On the way while leaving, Gu Xiaoxiao pulled out her phone and sent Gu Man a message. It was a message with photos of Gu-ning in a fight with others. Visually, Gu-ning seemed to be hit by the boys. Gu Man was walking downstairs after she had finished her meal in the canteen. She heard the ringtone, then took out the phone to check. Though she used a cheap old phone, it still could receive photos. When Gu Man saw the photos on her phone, she was scared and fell down from the stairs by accident. Her head hit the ground even. On the other side, Hao Ran and his friends called Gu-ning their boss all the time after they left the crowd. They complimented Gu-ning the same way Muku had done before. "Boss, since we all listen to you now, can you teach us Kung Fu? We want to be helpful in the future." "Exactly, boss, you're so awesome. Normally, each of us can fight against 7 or 8 men, but all of us together can't win you. You won the fight so easily. Boss." Hao Ran and his friends wouldn't stop talking. Gu-ning felt noisy but not displeased. Seeing Hao Ran and his friends now were like obedient dogs, Muku and Yumixi felt so proud. However, Muku was still annoyed that they had disrespected Gu-ning before. Well, how come someone who was so arrogant now is like an obedient dog? Muku said deliberately. Hearing that, Hao Ran and his friends were embarrassed. They knew Muku was unhappy about their previous attitude towards Gu-ning. Thus they didn't blame Muku for his words. Hao Ran walked to Muku, placing his hand on Muku's shoulder. "If we didn't fight, we won't get to know each other. Let the bygones be the bygones. We're brothers from now on. If you have any need and want my help in the future, just tell me." Yeah. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping agreed. Muku wasn't really mad at them actually. He also understood they were friends now, since they had taken Gu-ning as their boss. They even had changed their attitude. Muku thought there was no need to hate them any longer. Mixi is a child without much strength. "We need to take care of her," Gu-ning said. "Sure, no problem." Everyone immediately agreed. Yumixi was a little shy, but she accepted. Gu-ning didn't plan to eat an expensive meal. She simply wanted to have hot pot. But when they just walked to the restaurant, Gu-ning's phone rang. Both Yumixi and Muku were slightly surprised when Gu-ning took out her phone. They knew Gu-ning's family was poor. She had used a cheap old phone before, but now she used a brand new one, which seemed expensive. Hao Ran and his friends didn't know Gu-ning was from a poor family. They didn't find anything wrong. The caller was Gu Man. Gu-ning answered it at once. Her face changed suddenly when she heard the voice from the other side. Gu-ning said she would come soon, then hung up. "Boss, what's up?" Everyone noticed Gu-ning's change, and knew something bad must have happened. They all asked in worry. "My mother fell from the stairs and now is in unconsciousness. She was sent to the hospital. I need to visit her right now. You can have the meal without me." Gu-ning didn't hide the fact. She ran to take a taxi to the hospital afterwards. "Boss!" Before the rest could realize, Gu-ning was already gone. "Let's go and visit as well," Muku said. He ran ahead immediately. Hao Ran and the others all followed up without hesitation. Their boss's mother was in danger. They couldn't step aside. At that moment, a black Maserati moved over at a very high speed. There were two men sitting inside. Leng Xiaoting sat on the passenger's seat. He frowned a little. He was losing his patience because the one who was sitting on the driver's seat wouldn't stop talking, but he didn't interrupt. Shouting, "Leave it to our fourth bro. You're not fully recovered yet. What if you get injured again? Do take care of yourself." The man on the driver's seat complained for Leng Xiaoting's good. The man on the driver's seat was the one who had helped Leng Xiaoting destroy the tapes the other day. He was in a white casual suit as usual, looking handsome, decent and charming. He didn't care. Leng Xiaoting ignored him, continuing to talk. "Why do you have to get yourself involved in so much business? You even don't want to have a vacation. I don't think any girl will like you if you continue to do that." From afar, Leng Xiaoting's sight fell on a girl in a school uniform on the sidewalk. The girl seemed worried and was in a hurry to take a taxi. At the first glance, Leng Xiaoting felt familiar with the girl's figure. After they approached near, Leng Xiaoting recognized her. He immediately said, "Stop." The man who was still talking stopped the car unconsciously when he was interrupted. The car ceased right before Guning. "What's wrong?" the man asked, but Leng Xiaoting didn't answer his question. He rolled the car window down. "Get in the car," he said to the outside. Guning saw the car stop in front of her. She was about to move away when she heard a familiar voice. It was the man who had been injured the other night. Guning was a little amazed, but she heard him clearly. The man obviously wanted to give her a lift. Guning was in a hurry now. She didn't reject, but opened the car door and got inside. Meanwhile, the man on the driver's seat was shocked. He didn't expect. Leng Xiaoting asked him to stop the car to let the female student get inside. But who the hell was she? How could he had no idea that Leng Xiaoting knew such a young female student? Leng Xiaoting normally never got in touch with any woman. "The hospital, thanks," Guning said without further delay. "The hospital?" Leng Xiaoting frowned a little. He was puzzled why she was going to the hospital, but he didn't ask at all. He said to the man on the driver's directly, "Drive the car." "What?" "Oh, right." The man was apparently absent-minded. He got his mind back immediately when he heard Leng Xiaoting's voice. He drove the car ahead quickly. There were many questions in the man's mind. He kept peeking at Leng Xiaoting, who was sitting beside, then peeked at Guning from the rearview mirror. This female student was good-looking though, but she was too young. She couldn't be Leng Xiaoting's type. "Focus on driving," Leng Xiaoting said coldly. The man was frightened, then paid his attention on the road. He was still confused about the relationship between the female student and Leng Xiaoting. However, he didn't have the nerve to ask. Right at that moment, Guning's phone rang. She picked it up. Before she could say anything, she heard Muka's worried voice. "Boss, whose car did you get in? Are you safe?" When Muku and others followed up, they saw Guning get in a black Maserati. They were all shocked because they knew the car was so expensive. The owner must be the rich or the authorities. Although Guning got in the car must be because she knew the driver, Muka decided to call her to make sure she was safe. "I'm fine. You all can go back to the school now," Guning replied. "No, we want to visit your mother as well. We'll see you in the hospital." Muku hung up directly before Guning could respond, in case Guning wouldn't allow them to come. Guning knew they were being kind, thus she agreed. Both Leng Xiaoting and the man had good hearing. Although they had no intention to eavesdrop, they were able to hear the talk clearly. Both now understood the reason why Guning was in a hurry. "May I help?" Leng Xiaoting suddenly opened his mouth. The man on the driver's seat turned the steering wheel in horror. He almost hit the car before them. Luckily, he was a skillful driver and didn't cause an accident. But it wasn't his fault though. Leng Xiaoting, who was always cold, opened his mouth to offer a help out of the blue, which was totally frightening to him. Leng Xiaoting glared at the man. The man immediately paid his attention back to the road. He was also hoping Ling Xiaoting wouldn't say more to frighten him. Gu Ning didn't care though. Facing Ling Xiaoting's kindness, she rejected with politeness, "Thank you so much. I can handle it myself." Since Gu Ning wanted to deal with it on her own, Ling Xiaoting stopped asking. He wasn't a warm-hearted person. He helped her only because she had helped him. But Ling Xiaoting wasn't aware Gu Ning simply had made a deal with him. He didn't owe her anything. At the same time, the video of Gu Ning versus Hao Ran and his friends went viral on their school's forum. Ever since Hao Ran had challenged Gu Ning, there were many students paid close attention to it. The news that Gu Ning had accepted Hao Ran's challenge and the appointed time along with place were all revealed on the forum last night. Many said they would go to watch the fight at 1 p.m. But unexpectedly, the fight had ended before 1 p.m. Everyone was shocked by the result too. 80% of the students didn't believe Gu Ning could win, while 10% abstained, and the rest 10% believed in Gu Ning. They thought Gu Ning was really powerful on the video in the canteen, and she was very confident. Not everyone would take confidence as arrogance. The result was Gu Ning had won. Gu Ning really had won the fight within several minutes, which was a shocking news. What the F***CK? Who said it was 1 p.m. at the football field? How come it ended so soon? Exactly, I lost the chance to watch it in person. Who leaked the appointed time and place? Come out, we promise we won't beat you to death. Yes. Come out and explain to us. Come out. Meanwhile, the guy who had leaked the appointed time and place last night was now in sadness as well, because he hadn't watched the fight in person either. He was also mad. This is so unbelievable. Gu Ning alone won Hao Ran and his another two brothers? Who can tell me whether it's true? It must be something wrong with my computer. I need to restart it. I'm now an admirer of Gu Ning. She's so cool, isn't she? She is. She beat Zhang Tianping down to the ground by one move. It's so amazing. And her flip is so cool too. Some admired Gu Ning while some doubted. Did Hao Ran and his friends use their full strength? I still can't believe Gu Ning a girl alone and win them. Exactly. I doubt it too. The minute doubts appeared, those admirers of Gu Ning started to retort. Are you all blind? I was there in person. I saw it with my eyes. They did fight with full strength. If you don't believe you can have a fight with Gu Ning herself, then you'll know. Exactly. Not everyone is able to do flip in the air. Gu Ning now is the boss of Hao Ran and his friends. If you dare to question Gu Ning, you are questioning Hao Ran and his friends. Be careful about that. Xiao Feifei was almost hit by Hao Ran when she questioned the result on site. Knowing that, those who had doubts were all quiet now. They were scared of Hao Ran and his friends. I think I'm going to tell my goddess that I like her. Wish me good luck. Wish you good luck. Hope you can survive. Wish you good luck. Actually, I want to see a drama. Wish you good luck. Waiting for the result. Wish you good luck. Although they were wishing the student good luck, they all actually wanted to see a drama. As for Gu Ning, she couldn't care less about those discussions. It took half an hour to get to the hospital normally, but the man drove there steadily within 20 minutes. Gu Ning thanked Ling Xiaoting, then left the car. She immediately ran to the outpatient department. The Maserati stayed at the same place instead. Ling Xiaoting and the man watched Gu Ning leaving. Shouting, "Who is this female student? I never saw you help anyone on your own initiative." The man couldn't help but ask at the end. He felt extremely uncomfortable to keep it to himself. Let's go. Ling Xiaoting ignored the man's question.